True or false, in 3 years, more games will be made by AI agents or studios? Can we give like some sort of alpha here of like when should we kind of like be expecting this?
But we're gonna announce.
I got $1 million question. Are we gonna see like the Kim Kardashian sunglass mirrored her playing poker game?
So everyone that played the game actually gets rewarded with a.
When are we gonna get some Seeker activity too as well, man? When are we gonna build something for Seeker? All right, GM, we are back. We're definitely an interesting point this week. It's been an interesting week. Wouldn't you say, Justin? I mean, we just saw a lobster send full money to a wallet. So, I need to figure out how to talk to these AI agents and tell them I'm super poor because my bags are so down that I need some sort of USDC or USDT because that's all I'm going to be accepting right now. But an interesting week again in gaming as well. Like we're seeing gaming have its kind of maybe up and down run. Maybe you could say a little spirit run, whatever you want to call it. But I think it's, again, good games take a long time to develop. Good games that are truly trying to break through this barrier that is in Web3 right now is definitely a tough momentum because as you've probably been coming from your background in Zynga and you're building Play.Fun, you come from a corporate world as well, and you understood that business plans and plans of how to monetize and how to build an actual organization, how to build the game, and how to make sure that the game at the forefront is fun. All those things come into to matter. Whereas in Web3, man, we've taken the very broken road. We've taken this very like, you know what? Like, let's figure out how to, pump this token and tell them that this, 4K trailer is going to be the next, greatest thing. And then guess what? That game doesn't get developed. So, Justin, without further ado, tell me, how are you feeling about everything right now in the market, man? How do you like wake up and just say, man, I'm going to build Play.Fun. I don't care about the noise. How do you stay focused with all this noise?
Well, I mean, opportunities everywhere, right? And with crisis comes opportunity. That everybody is very aware of that concept. And I think right now there's just so much opportunity in crypto and AI. And I think it's got people feeling uneasy, right? Everybody knows that this is about to change the way software is built. The market is in free fall. We have, like the Citrini report coming out a couple of days ago that freaked everybody out about what the future could look like, even in just a couple of years. And I don't think analysts on the game side have really gone through the same exercise yet and talked about it as broadly. And games are on this sort of long multi-year cycle sometimes where you're shipping something and working on something for an extended period. So in some way, it's been an interesting cycle because games are usually at the forefront of all the technology. We're usually the first to integrate every new bit of like hardware and software that becomes available. The cutting edge of algorithms, the cutting edge of hardware. But in AI, actually, games are kind of falling behind all of this stuff that we normally consider mundane and slow. Like SaaS companies are actually implementing AI first. And part of the reason for this is the sales cycle, the development cycle on games is just so long. Even mobile games have become more like AAA games in terms of the amount of time that's being invested in some of these games by the big studios. And so, yeah, like you said, in my background at Zynga, I mean, we started the company with just a few people in a poker game in a weekend. The challenge was, hey, Justin, can you go build Zynga Poker in a weekend? And then we put out the first version. And now, these games, they take a long time to ship. And so I think the question is, how do you set expectations that you can actually meet, right? And what we've seen with other projects in the space is that often the traders want very high expectations and excitement and hype around something in order to trade it. But the team, they then have to wait for that super long development cycle for anyone to actually deliver and deal with the failure rate that is actually normal in this industry. Crypto Web3 games gets a bad rep, but like actually, if you're anyone who's spent any time in a real large scale game studio that puts out hits knows how many things never ship. And so you're getting a view into what it's like, the messy sort of, from concept to production view that most people never see. Nintendo has held back 10 times the amount of games compared to what they've shipped. and you've never seen those games, and only the people that have worked at Nintendo have seen those games. And it's the same for Zynga. I mean, we had so many games that we never shipped, many of which were great ideas. You saw the concept, you saw the trailer, you saw the slides, you saw the demo, you played the prototype. People played it for 6 months, they played it for a year internally, and then you can the game because you just realize it's going to be too much investment to get it to where it needs to go, or it's not going to be successful in the market. And I think what everybody's wondering right now is if SaaS companies are in trouble, and freemium game companies are just games as a service instead of software as a service. And that's one of the things we really popularized at Zynga, is the idea that games could be a service-oriented online business, just like software as a service. Then aren't games as a service also potentially going to be completely transformed by AI, and in both positive and potentially just really, really tricky ways? And I think that's what it should be top of mind. But I feel like in games, we're just a little bit behind in this tech adoption cycle compared to what we usually are. And it's been a really interesting to watch for that reason.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting you talk a little bit about this, right? Where AI is, and kind of how you're looking at the SaaS model right now, and how AI is really kind of taken over that. And I'm almost going to stop you and say, like, let's go back to when you kind of like started Zynga, right? And where were you in gaming at that point to where gaming is today? And it's like, man, console games, and going to pick up, at your local Walmart, Kmart, looking at the shelves at GameStop, all these things that we used to have to do to just access the game, right? Just to have access to the game and know what games are coming right from magazines. And back in the day, depending on if you had, the computer and all that stuff, like, man, to where we are today. And we're talking about AI games, and we're talking about how to even find the way of that kid having that dopamine, that rush, that kind of like staring at that glass window. And it's like, man, I wish I could afford, or I want to buy FIFA, but also Madden's coming out, Mortal Kombat's out. Man, like, you have all these like array of games. How are you able to see right now AI games, and talk about, how you just mentioned the SaaS, like how it's kind of taken over with that same like fundamentals that you've had when you were like 19, 20, when you were starting Zynga, and saying, hey man, like, this is the next thing. I could see it. I see the vision. We need to connect more dots.
Yep. Yeah, 100%. So like, one of the things about games is, and that they've always had, that's been very powerful, is there's zero marginal cost of reproducing a game, right? Once you write the software, you distribute it. This is why most software has been such a good business the last couple of decades. Uniquely, when games became a service, you could control for a lot of the challenges that other forms of media had. Games are interactive. People could pay you directly. Music and videos, they suffered. Like, a lot of the growth over the last 10, 15, 20 years, when you look at games versus the movie industry, what changed was games adopted into a games as a service model, whereas movies and music industry had to sort of like figure out a way to be distributed where artists could get paid fairly. And what it actually netted out was is that, like, a lot of artists who maybe previously made a better living they struggle more in the new paradigm with streaming. With games, what we saw was that games were able to grow the size of the market because they're able to give away these games without worrying about piracy and upfront purchases like you talked about a couple decades ago. And it's obviously still happening with console, but it's a tiny portion of the market at this point. And solve those problems, increased access, right? Because the software was free to distribute. So why not create this business model where the people who pay could subsidize all the people who didn't pay? The people who didn't pay, they play with their friends, they talk about the game, they help the game be more fun for the people who are paying, so everybody wins. I think what we're seeing now is that production costs with AI will be the thing that just changed dramatically. And so you're seeing it with individuals. There's tons of people creating this vibe coded stuff with AI that's out there all over X every day. You're seeing new interesting things popping up. But within companies, they're also using it. And they're using it a lot, actually. And I know, in Steam and some other services, they're saying you should mark when you use AI content. There's actually no way of really telling. And it's in the pipeline of most reasonable game developers at this point. To what extent it's in the pipeline? Is it completely AI generated versus just concepting or prototypes to sort of full scale production? It's different in every company, but there are very few teams that aren't touching AI at this point. you got to be a bit of a Luddite to be in that situation. I mean, even the person who's just coming up with the game ideas, consulting an AI for how to solve some problem, is in some form using AI to solve design problems that they would just previously sit and think about for as long and as hard as they could. So even at the extreme sort of tail end, there's people who they're still using this technology. I think what we're about to see is a huge explosion of content that looks similar to photos and videos and what we saw with UGC on the internet, with Instagram and YouTube. That's not quite happened with games yet. It's sort of happened with Roblox. Roblox has been 20 years in the making, but you go look at Roblox, it's kind of like YouTube for games, especially for kids. But the problem, Roblox is still like a full-blown game editor. If you spend any time in there, it's yeah, maybe teenagers can figure it out because there's a lot of really smart kids that grow up on Roblox. They learn how to program early and stuff. It's definitely better than jumping into Unreal Engine or something, but it's not easy. I mean, it's full-blown 3D code in there with the editor, and they've simplified, but they haven't, not dramatically. It's still like, a lot of the stuff you learn in Roblox Engine is the same stuff you're learning in Unity or Unreal. And so what AI does is it actually allows for us for the first time to get rid of all that complexity and let people create these games potentially by themselves that could end up looking increasingly higher quality. A lot of people have been watching on X these videos that are coming out from Sea Dance and the latest models. They look like Hollywood quality. And they're asking themselves, well, why aren't games like that yet? The truth is, like, games are a bunch of different forms of media stitched together. And in that sense, like, they're the last thing that's going to come together because they require people to put together all the pieces of what's out there. But if you look at what's out there, you can now generate photorealistic images very, very consistently and very well with Nano Banana and these other image models. You can now generate meshes from these images, go 2D to 3D very, very consistently with a lot of open source models and services like Meshi. And so you have 3JS in the browser, which can render these 3D textured assets without any downloads. So the pieces are actually already there. The one difference is if you go and try to one-shot with like an AI right now, it doesn't necessarily know how to use all these different pieces that are out there and then put them together, right? But there's no technical leaps required for someone to start producing these games at the same quality that we're being shocked by, because the component pieces are already there. We have audio that's Hollywood quality. We have video that's Hollywood quality. We have photos that are Hollywood quality. This is what you need. These are the components you need to make a game that's at, game studio quality. And so the question is, like, how will those tools be stitched together in a way that makes it easy for these individual creators? And then what becomes of game development when that's the case? And I think the answer is that games, they stop looking like services and they start looking a lot more like content. And so if you look at in the past, every time there's been a huge technical shift for games, it's not just that the content evolves with the business model. And if you go and make a Punch the Monkey game, I don't know if did you see Punch the Monkey over the last couple of weeks?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, there are so many people that are talking about this monkey, right? And making a Punch the Monkey game when your dev cycles are 6 months to a year, it's not possible. But when you can make a game in a half an hour or an hour, it's very possible, right? And you drop that game on X when something's trending, it could very much be a game that everyone plays. So we look at this game that Jonathan Mann created back when that Coldplay meme went viral. Maybe you remember when the couple was caught cheating at the Coldplay concert. Jonathan Mann made a game where you search around an audience for the couple. A very simple game. It takes 10 seconds to play. It got 20 million views on X. So what's the last game release you saw that wasn't by a studio that got 20 million views on a post of 10 seconds of game footage? It just basically doesn't exist, right? So
and didn't spend $10 million in marketing it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's probably the view numbers are inflated with all the money they spent, right? Versus just this organic interest in what was done. And so what that tells you is there's a vacuum. Just like at Zynga, when we started games as a service, people were going and playing stuff on like addictinggames.com, right? These simple games, they'd go to the page, the game would end, there'd be nothing saved. They couldn't play with their friends. There was no account. There was no stored progress in the game. You go, you play the simple arcade game, you leave, you come back the next day. It's like you never played. We just took these pieces from the rest of the internet and said, well, they should have a state. We should let them grow their points. We should let them play with other people they know, all these other things, and made it easy. Now, people are obviously, and because that content was different, everyone started wanting to play that kind of content because it was just better. And I think what we're seeing is that, like, for video and short form content, we've already moved to everything having to be hyper topical, right? You have to be talking about whatever the latest thing is because that's what the algorithm is going to serve. And that's what people are interested in today. But games haven't made that transition. So it seems obvious, to do the Citrini sort of future looking analyst report, that if you were to say, what does 2028 look like for games? The majority of games that people are playing look a lot more like short form video. They're about the topics of the day that people are already talking about. And when the USA hockey team beats the Canadian hockey team in the Olympics, there's probably going to be 25 different games that people made about that aren't NHL 2028 or like a full blown EA style sports game. But they're simple games about the moments in the game. The moment where somebody got hit with a hockey stick in the mouth was probably a game, right? There's probably a moment where there's the golden goal at the end, and that's all the game is. We're going to start seeing these forms of content, and those forms of content don't lend themselves to being monetized like services. So the question is, like, what is the business model when games become short form content?
Yeah, and I got a question for you there. Like, let's keep going right there for a second, because you're mentioning a lot of keeping up with the algorithm and today's kind of like metas and all that stuff and creating these games. But what about like maybe serving to the other generations that exist, right? Like, we mentioned, NHL here for a second as well, right? NHL 2026 is out or whatever it is. And I don't know what the numbers are, the sales numbers for them are, but there's still generations out there that are still very old school. And I think if you look at gaming, maybe in a whole, like, I think we know, we see where the numbers are, but do you think that the bridge from the new generation, from what everybody's seeing on TikTok to what everybody's seeing on Next, to everyone seeing, how do we bridge that to the older generation? And I say that in a sense because, especially Web3 gaming, having this token, having this financial instrument in a game that's never been a live financial instrument before in a game to where we are today, it's caused a lot of backlash, but it's also, hey, we see the future, where the future is bright. Web3 gaming is going to be, the future. But we haven't been able to connect these bridges between demographics, between games itself, and then where we are today in its present moment. What are you thinking is like, what is still missing, or what do you think is like still the missing bridge to all of this? And are we catering too much to what today is and not to what the future could be?
I mean, games are a shared experience, right? And I think if I'm to be, in crypto games, I've been involved as an advisor to some of the earliest companies in this space, like Decentraland, Immutable, Dapper Labs, like really companies that have created CryptoKitties, Immutable, like these companies have done so much for defining what games are in Web3. I think the biggest challenge here has been, how much is this going to be something entirely new versus how much does it look like how games are with some twists? And this is always one of the biggest challenges with making anything. I think it's natural, and there were so many problems to solve over the years that we should start with what's proven and then start iterating away from it with crypto. But I think it's also fair to say that we haven't quite figured out what makes a Web3 game unique enough that the actual extra player, to your point, like a normal person who just plays NHL now says, I want the Web3 one. That has been a challenge, right? That has been a challenge that we have not yet actually solved. And I think there's a question here of, like, games as a service and social games, what we made in mobile games, there was no, like, we didn't have to convince players to migrate to those games. They saw the value in migrating to those games. It was clearly better than what they were doing before for most people. And that some people still want to sit down and play a console game, and like there's also a place for that. But in general, like, it increased the market by many tens of X because more people resonated with these games. It fit their lifestyle. It fit the way they wanted to play. It fit who they wanted to play with. I think the big answer to your question is, like, games are a social activity. Actually, they always have been. It's not about video games. It's just about games. Like, why do games exist? They're a way of interacting with other people when otherwise we wouldn't have some this. It's a new context, a new way for us to do things with other people that challenges ourselves and lets us, explore our relationship in a different way. And that's why social games have been so powerful. Even Web3 games where they're single player are still that, because there's some form of multiplayer in how the token is traded that makes these games feel more connected with other people. And I think that the thing that we've yet to figure out as a space consistently in a way where we've got like a model that everyone's repeating is, how do we make that a default experience that anybody can understand? And it's simple enough that it's now something where people say, I want to play the Web3 version. And it's not enough to say, like, because here's a sign of when something is really, really working. A lot of people in the Web3 space will say, yeah, well, your hockey game just isn't as good as, it's not as good as EA's hockey game they put out this year. So why am I going to play the hockey game that's not as good, but it has crypto? It has to be at least the same fidelity. The game has to be at least as fun. I don't actually buy that. I think if we find the real lever with Web3, if you look at the history of technology disruption, what you really see is not that something had to meet and exceed every single previous bar that existed in the thing that it's disrupting. It's that actually it doesn't. It's worse in a bunch of ways, but it's really so much better in some new way that the old stuff can't compare in that new way, and that people want to go to the new thing. And I realize I'm speaking abstractly here, but what I mean is, like, the games I'm describing, when games become short form content, you think go back to the Olympic NHL game, and you have a game about the player getting hit in the teeth with the hockey stick. That game has nothing to do with NHL 2026 and whatever EA makes, right? But it's going to come out the day that the hockey game happens, when all the videos are there, and it's going to be shared in the same threads, and everyone's going to be playing it because it's a shared moment. And so it's just objectively better. It's serving a need that the other game cannot serve. And no one's asking themselves, like, is this as good as NHL 2026? And is it as fun? And does it have as good as reviews? All that stuff is irrelevant. There's a new type of content that couldn't have existed before. Now, where does crypto fit in that particular idea? And clearly, it's in monetization. The game that is a short little game that gets shared on X, that then becomes, about this, dodging the hockey stick so you don't get hit in the teeth, or whatever this simple, funny game is, it cannot monetize with in-app purchases in the same way that all these other games monetize, because it's this short little game that gets stuck in the feed and that people will play for a day or two or three. Now, what does that sound a lot like? It sounds a lot like memes. These are games that are memes. It's like games, just like videos become, first we started with images that were memes, and now AI video production is so easy that now a lot of memes are becoming videos, because even casual people can make videos as memes, whereas 2 years ago, that was pretty much impossible. So another wave that's coming is games as memes. And when games as memes comes, how are we going to monetize them? Probably how we monetize memes. We monetize memes with pump.fun. Like, this has already been proven, right? So there's no other way to monetize memes. Pump.fun, meme coins are the way to predict where memes will go in a way that people, they like being a part of the meme communities by holding a piece of the activity and the action and the engagement related to that meme. And pump.fun has been the way to do that. So to put it really simply, and it's taken probably longer than I probably should explain this earlier in the podcast, but what Play.Fun does is like pump.fun for games. So if pump.fun lets you monetize memes and it solves that problem, Play.Fun lets you monetize this new type of game content, where you're not making a game that you're saying is going to be the next MMO. You're not promising that like everybody's investing in this game. You're simply creating a token to draw max attention and max volatility and prediction around this game. You make the NHL game about the guy dodging the hockey stick, toward his face from the Olympic game. It's something everybody pays attention to for 3 to 5 days. There's a bunch of trading volume that the game creator receives for having created this token that everybody played with. And in the protocol rewards the players of the game with over $1,000 airdrop if the token graduates. So everyone that played the game actually gets rewarded, including people who did not spend any money. And people can spend the token that they earn in the game to multiply their points. But the most important thing is that people earning tokens from playing games has been around now in Web3 for, 7 or 8 years, right? There's a very important difference here, which is now with AI and skills and agents, we've created a one-line way In under a minute, you can take any game and you can add these token rewards to it, and then launch a coin, a fair launch on a bonding curve like Pump.Fun, where there's no insiders, there's no investors. All the same tokenomics that everybody likes about meme coins can now exist for games. That doesn't exist right now. A lot of the game coins that are out there right now, they suffer from the same sort of VC-backed dynamics that people, a lot of people in the space, they don't want to trade those coins, right? This says, no, these can be community-owned, fair launched coins around games that are exciting, where the developer gets rewarded trading fees. Just like, we're seeing platforms like Bags and Pump.Fun do really well with. Why not build something like that for games? Well, a year or two ago, game development cycles are long. It's probably too hard for people to just go and build these simple games they want to attach tokens to. Today, in the last couple of months, with the progress we've seen, there's a ton of people who would push this type of content with a token. So, it's a new world. It's a new type of content. It needs a new business model.
Yeah. What's the message you got there? How do you talk to game developers about Play.Fun? And like, how do you say to develop this different business idea or different business approach to developers not getting tokens and dumping tokens and having trading fees? And how do you tell them, like, because of the shift of the where AI is, you're now shipping games maybe every weekend, right? Because it takes you maybe a couple hours to build games, right? And so your idea or your thought to the conversation is to these game developers of like, hey, out of the month, you might hit 2 out of 4. You might hit 4 out of 4. You might do really well. But if you look at it long term, you might be able to make, millions, let's just say, right? Per se, if you do it the right, you put in the effort every single weekend, stay on top of the metas, give them the fun games, and you tweak these things. How do you approach that to a game developer? How do you tell them that, coming from that traditional space of, you come from it as well? And like, how do you tell them, like, this is the future, right? Like, come build on Play.Fun. This could be a different, entertaining way. AI is definitely here. But again, the idea of the business case is different now.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we're going to convince traditional game developers right now. If I'm being honest, like, I think there are a lot of talented people out there that some of them are naturally drawn to AI, and they're saying, "Wow, there's a lot of amazing technologists in games," and they're looking at what's happening in AI, and they're saying, "I'm going to dedicate myself to this, and I'm going to become like my own AI native game studio." Those people are actually very surprisingly in the minority right now, because a lot of other people are heads down building these games that are going to take a long cycle to ship, and they're hearing about the AI stuff. Maybe they're assisting their code with it a little bit, but they've already got plans. They've already got something they're focused on. There's a new type of game creator that's starting to become prevalent, and they have a presence on X, and they're posting a lot on X and on socials, and they understand how the algorithm works, and they know intuitively what kind of content they should be making. And these people are the people that are going to be able to do the most in this new world, because the reality is, like, the playbook is already there. The playbook is, how are you a content creator that succeeds on the internet in 2026? And X has a set of things you need to know if you want to be successful with content. Instagram does, YouTube does. And these rules have been developed, and this playbook has been developed over years now. Games have tried to just like plug their ears and pretend that this distribution channels, that they don't exist, because they haven't been as relevant for games, right? We drop a trailer there, we think of it as an announcement channel, but no one's treated it as the native channel for distribution. When that's where the opportunity is with a certain type of content, right? Because we don't want to just see clips of some MMO fantasy game in the feed every day. It's just not interesting. It doesn't fit. It can't reach the levels of relevancy that the algorithm now reaches. That's what this is all about. The word is relevancy. How are games relevant to people when we're getting served things that are so specific to our needs and our interests now? The games need to meet that moment. They need to be designed to meet the moment of relevancy like all the other content has, or they will increasingly lose engagement to these other forms of content. And so in that sense, it's not just about what we think will happen. It's about what must happen, because games are losing engagement already to short form video. Games are losing engagement to these algorithms that are now becoming more interesting and more engaging than a lot of games that don't adapt to like the way that people are using technology in the last few years. And so the playbook is they need to be creators, and a lot of the game developers won't make it. Most of the game developers didn't make it through freemium and mobile, right? Mobile was new game developers. It was Zynga, it was Rovio, it was Supercell. These are companies that did not exist before mobile games. Social games was the same thing. So the opportunity here is for someone to create the next game studio or to be the Mr. Beast of these types of games. And you've seen on Roblox that's already happened, right? There's developers that have become these, they make many tens of millions of dollars every year now. I think that like AI games are going to create the same thing. And I don't know if we can continue to call them vibe coded games or if they end up taking some sort of new name. But it's a category that's starting to take shape.
Yeah, and maybe let me get one more insight from you. Netflix games, YouTube games, Amazon games, like, we're seeing that whole spike and the whole shift as well, like from the Steam to the Epic. Not saying that they're still the powerhouses, but we're seeing other people contend. Samsung with gaming on their TVs. Do we see, when we talk about relevance here, I mean, man, talk about relevance if you're able to watch it on live in streams in these streaming platforms and be able to play it right there on the moment. I think that, man, that connection there itself could transform gaming even further. Do you think we will get to that stage, and what will be needed to get to that stage?
Yeah, I think we will. I think there's two ways to get the games in a bunch of people's hands, right? Well, is that really only one way? And it's distribution channels. And there's a few different ways to access those right now. One is to pay for ads. And games have been doing that for a very long time on mobile. Games are still where the majority of mobile advertising revenue comes from for companies like Facebook and Google. The problem is that those channels have become extremely expensive. And basically that like new games cannot use these channels very well because they have to monetize better than every previous game built before them that's also using these advertising channels in order to outbid them on the advertising channel. So advertising is the most scalable, reliable way to get new customers. It's also almost impossible for any new game to survive, to have a profitable user acquisition with ads, because there's 15 years of games that have been optimizing before you, and you're extremely unlikely to ever be able to thread that needle now. That's the thing that most new game studios won't tell you, or they want to close their eyes, plug their ears, and keep building and pretend that that's not the case. The second one is using social channels, where you have to be relevant to the algorithm of the user. And that's kind of the opportunity that I'm talking about, which I think is a vacuum right now. There's nothing out there. You've seen so few games like this. And when they pop out, like the Coldplay game, it does 20 million views. I mean, like we said, there's no game studio that's ever been able to do that recently, 20 million views organically. But then you make a simple Coldplay game, the right game at the right time, and suddenly you see that kind of response. It's basically saying there's not enough content like this. People want games that are relevant to what people are talking about. And then the third way is just raw distribution power. Like Amazon puts a games button on their website. Amazon has tons of users and they just send people to the thing. They feature the games or whatever. It's still a form of like publishing, those other platforms in some sense, where, Apple Arcade, Amazon, YouTube, they all have a games channel. They have a lot of users. They can send a certain portion of their users to the games channel. Once they land on the landing page of the games channel, they can decide where those users go by putting a certain amount of games above the fold before you scroll, and 20% will go here and 10% will go here and 10% will go here. But again, like, you're totally at the whim of these other companies and what they decide to do, right? There's no community formation. It's, one day they decide to knock you off the featured spot and your game is dead, because you're back to having to go buy the ads, right? So if you really think about owning your own destiny and having a new shot every day of being a game that breaks out, there's only one place to do it. And it's the same place that all the other content creators are playing right now, which is in the content creation business of being somebody who every day figures out what's relevant to people and tries to make something that's relevant. The other stuff is just sort of a, getting featured by Amazon is not a solution to your game succeeding. It's temporary, and the lifespan of games content is going down, just like the lifespan of all this other content is going down. So even if you get featured for a week or for a month, your users will churn, and then you'll have to figure out how to get more users. So you can fight the headwinds that are basically pushing games toward these shorter and shorter lifespans, or you can just bet on those and turn it around and make them tailwinds where you're saying, I'm going to make content that doesn't live long. I'm not going to promise people that this is an investment in a token that's going to make them rich in a game that's going to last for 10 years. Because you can just acknowledge and be honest and say that model basically doesn't work anymore. There are no new games being built in 2026. There are very few new games that are actually getting through the gauntlet of distribution, monetization, and retention and surviving the engagement apocalypse that AI has created. And so you can either use those tools to adapt to what that means for games, which is they become short form, digestible, consumable content, or you can try to hang on to this games as a service model, which it's going to be years before it dies completely. Okay, even console games are not dead completely, but the writing was on the wall in 2000, from 2007 to 2011. We already knew at Zynga that games as a service were the future. Did we know it would grow 20x? Maybe not 20x. We thought it would grow a lot. I'm not surprised when I look back at the chart and I see how it ended up. Maybe further than I could have imagined in 2007, but it was also kind of obvious. Like it was kind of obvious that things were going in that direction, but the console game companies had no way of really adapting to that reality. Even to some of them were in denial. Some of them knew it, but they couldn't do anything about it. And so there's a bunch of game studios who know what I'm saying is true. They know that they cannot put out games in the way that they were, but they're not ready to admit it. And there's some that they just can't do anything about it, right? They're not set up to do anything about it. And so when you ask like who are the right first people, it's these independent people who are independent game developers who've been using AI and like see a new opportunity and they can do something about it and take advantage of where the world is going, because they don't have a large team that's stuck in a single direction.
Yeah. Let me like shift the conversation here, because you've given me the phenomenal insight to just the market and everything where we are. But now let's shift the conversation a little bit to the player and the trader at Play.Fun, right? Like given the market standing of where you see things and giving it where we are today and how gaming as a service and everything that we spoke about, how do we now come to Play.Fun and be able to now take a trader and have them figure out how to speculate, but also get the gamer to figure out how to play and speculate as well, and combine both of them? Because there's a lot of traders that don't want to play, right? But they want to speculate, right? They want to speculate. How do we get them in the same room? How do we make sure that we're curating to them? How do we incorporate Play.Fun into all of this?
Yep. Yeah. So what we're doing is solving the problems for the player, the traders, and the game developers, and understanding what each of them want. So simply put, like players in play to earn, or I won't even say players in play to earn, because what we're doing is not supporting play to earn games. Actually, play to earn has really struggled because when you create these super long emission schedules, you create like this hourly rate that is uninteresting to most people. And you end up with a lot of farming because you end up with a financial upside that's just not interesting to the vast majority of people. So it goes to, this point where if you're earning $1 an hour playing this game, it almost cheapens the experience of the game, right? And so what people really want is a chance to play that quick hit game that went viral, and suddenly like the tokens they got that were worth a few dollars become worth hundreds of dollars or something, because the token went viral over the next couple of days, right? That is actually what's interesting to people. And that's why we go and we chase new games in Web3 games all the time. But the problem is new games are in short supply. Pump.Fun solved this problem by making a factory for coins. There's so many new coins, you can always be in the one that runs, right? So the reason that traders should care about Play.Fun is these games have a different way of getting attention than Pump.Fun. Pump.Fun doesn't have a way to drive attention with engagement and holders who can earn a small amount of token that ends up becoming worth a meaningful amount of money, and who will then become promoters and parts of this community in the way that these other people who can't participate. Like one of the challenges with something like Pump.Fun is continuing to bring in retail and new traders that are going to keep the ecosystem fresh, exciting, alive, not just like PvP between the existing traders, right? So the opportunity with something like this is that games are a way to pull people in that would otherwise not already be in the ecosystem. there could be a token behind the game that a lot of people, the first time they play, they don't need to know anything about it. And we've made it so casual with the protocol to play. They can play without logging in. Their points can be saved after they log in. They can log in with Web2 logins and Privy is used for a wallet that's created automatically. This is like a totally casual experience when it comes to anyone on X or Instagram could tap a link in one of these games and they would figure it out and they'd now become a holder of this token. That's something totally new. Traders should like that because more holders, bigger communities, real retail, it's not just like, PvP bundled launches. It's like actual real people who are playing these games and the distribution of the token is going to be much healthier because of that. And the opportunity for it to become a much larger meme. So this is about fundamentally, like, it's not about replacing Pump.Fun. It's about realizing that like Pump.Fun is the best way to launch a token for a meme right now. But there's nothing for games actually. And interestingly, a lot of people said, hey, wouldn't it be interesting if there was a launch pad like Pump.Fun for games? But what they've then done is like made it about funding a game or made it about like all these other things to do with games. There's even been people who've said vibe coding is interesting. Why don't we do a launch pad for vibe coded stuff and let people buy tokens to like invest in the different vibe coded stuff? But none of this is actually what people want. Like the problem that needs to be solved is how do traders get tokens with better liquidity, better distribution, more interesting outcomes and volatility and things to speculate on, things that can't just be expressed with the image that's in a typical meme coin. And how do players get like the ability to play games where they're about topical things that are relevant to them today, that actually sometimes lead to them getting financial outcomes that are way more interesting than farming a game for a year. These are the problems that we're solving. It's this volatility and short-lived nature of these things that is what makes them interesting. Like in some sense, when you make your crypto tokenomics sustainable in a game, you almost ensure that it hits some equilibrium where people just earn some very small amount of money per hour, because that's what you're doing. You're divvying up the rewards over some extremely extended period of time. The whole point of Play.Fun is to create the volatility, right? Because that volatility is actually what people are chasing. If you look at the market now, there's a flight to stability on one side with Bitcoin, Sol, maybe ETH. There's a flight to volatility with meme coins. There's still $500 million in volume happening in the Launchpad ecosystem in Solana because people still want volatility. They want either extreme volatility or extreme stability. That's what traders are looking for. So that's what traders want. Game developers want a way to get in front of people and get paid for making great games. Like this is all they've ever wanted, is to make a living doing something they love, which is making games. And previously it's making something for the App Store and figuring out how to do in-app purchases to support their game. Now it could be making content where they ship it on this and they make enough money to justify having created the game. That's it, right? Simple. Just like a video creator or anyone else on socials, a content creator, they need to be able to support creating their content through monetizing it, and that's what the token will let them do.
Yeah, Justin, man, it's been awesome having you on. I love your takes and love your insights, and really truly, I think, grateful for you being in Web3 gaming. I know it's not an easy road here. There's no playbook, there's no magic playbook that we get to like be like, hey man, this is what you're supposed to be doing next. All of it's unknown, right? You wake up and you're just like I said, you got to stay to the conviction that you're building, but know that the road is super rocky. I got $1 million question here. Are we gonna see like the Kim Kardashian sunglass mirrored her playing poker game? Are we gonna see some sort of game like that? Since you've created poker before, a poker game, can we get something like that?
I think we're gonna see it. I mean, I think maybe, I'm not sure how many of the people listening to this will remember, but there was a Kim Kardashian game in the App Store that was huge. It was maybe 9 or 10 years ago it came out, and it was from a mobile game company called Glue Mobile. And at the time, a lot of the mobile game companies were just making games that were not about real people or real brands. We didn't have the Monopoly branded games yet. We didn't have celebrities. None of the brands made it into mobile. All the mobile games were successful. They were called, Mafia Wars, Poker, Zynga Poker, really basic names, because there wasn't these big brands weren't in the App Store yet. So you could go and make hundreds of millions of dollars making a game that didn't have some famous brand people already knew about. Then it started getting more competitive, and Glue Mobile said, why don't we pay Kim Kardashian for her name and make a game about her? And it was a huge success. And then they went and they did a bunch of licensing. Then all the other mobile game companies also started licensing, because now they could point toward this Kim Kardashian game and they could say, look, it made her hundreds of millions of dollars. And all she did was license her likeness of herself, her name, and her, her appearance. And everyone started doing it. It kicked off a whole wave where then mobile gaming started to care about IP and licensing. Now, it sounds obvious in retrospect, but why would you be the people to go and pay these celebrities for their license when you're already making hundreds of millions of dollars? No mobile game company wanted to do that. But then once they saw how it affected the profitability of the game, after someone proved that it worked at scale, then everybody wanted to do it. So it feels a lot like where these other forms of content are now. Like, what's old is new again. How do you make something get attention? It's relevancy. Whether or not it's Kim Kardashian is kind of, it's up for debate. Like, is this a scale game anymore, or is the feed really about this hyper targeting now? The era of 9 years ago was about the Kim Kardashians with 100 million followers. But if you look at how X works now, I mean, I've got, 600, 700,000 followers on X, but the algorithm, it doesn't care about that anymore. It's for you algorithm. It only cares about you're only as good as your next post, right? So the stars of the content now are the topics. It's the topics of the day. It's no longer the person who's built up a following, over years, and then uses that huge follower count to get tremendous distribution, because Kim Kardashian doesn't show up in these feeds as much as she used to. So I'm sure there will be. Games that people make now that the production costs for something like that have dropped like crazy. But I also think like the real opportunity is you don't need to work with these celebrities to now have something that goes way bigger than what you could do with them before. And that's an opportunity where, like, if you're a small developer and you're wondering, well, do I have to go figure out how to work with Kim Kardashian? I think the answer is no. I think you need to be terminally online, as the Gen Zers say, and like go figure out what's trending and make something about that. And in most cases, you should be careful about how you use IP, but like in a lot of cases, if you're making a parody game about something or someone that's happened and you do it in a way that's satire, you're probably going to be okay. Consult get your own legal advice. But if you're not making an official game about this topics and people and they're public figures, and you're doing it in a way where you're being careful about how their likeness is used and what you're saying about their involvement with the game, which is they may or may not have any, then there's a lot of paths to making interesting content. Look at YouTube, right? YouTube is talking about a lot of these reaction videos and things that are about other pieces of content all the time. Games have to get comfortable with this area in between full product licensing or full IP licensing and being social commentary. This is something that videos use all the time. Like, you make videos about things that are clips of shows which are copyrighted, but your video about the show is fair use because of the way that you're using the content inside of the video. This is something games don't usually deal with. It's just like black and white. Am I licensing Kim Kardashian or not? But the next wave is getting in the same space as videos, making games commentary, social commentary, leaning into fair use.
Yeah. Well, with that said, then, what I'm going to go do today? Then I'm going to go make a poker game, and I'm going to do it with Tolly and aliens, because he's been all about the aliens lately. So guess what? Let's go make a poker game with Tolly playing against the aliens and find out who's actually the better poker player.
Let's go.
I think we go. That's the way we're going to be able to hit the right numbers that I need to hit.
Yes, let's go. It's aliens.
Justin, man, I appreciate once again you coming on. Last final thought. I got to ask the final question is, you've been in this space for quite some time as well. What's one thing that you wish you learned a lot earlier when you started Web3 gaming? Well, you've also kind of changed a little bit of the name as well, from the OG open game to now the Play.Fun. Tell us like some of the things that you wish you knew, or how to make sure that when you are pivoting or changing, that you're actually looking at the forefront of all of it, how to make this successful.
Oh man. The last question, just a quick one, right? there's a pretty long list there. I don't beat myself up over it because like I think this space, like if you just look at the rate of success in this space, games are hard. So first of all, there's a lot of grass is greener. You know, when crypto's running, I'll go talk to Web2 game devs and they're like, wow, look at these crypto game guys are making all this money. How are they doing it? They're pretty, you know, they're wondering like what they're doing wrong. Are they in the wrong space? And then now with I think what's happening with games in Web3 is when tokens go away, you know, everybody's aware. Like we know that this team is no longer making their game. When other game companies die in Web2, like they don't have to tell anyone about it, except for their shareholders, maybe privately or something like this, and their employees. But there's not like an actual like public notice that goes out to tell everybody because there's no token. And so what's happening really is like both Web2 and Web3 in games. It's a really tough time to navigate and like put a new company and a new game out there. That's why people need more opportunity, and that's what we're trying to build. For what I've learned, I think that it's leaning more into the actual things that are working to an extreme extent. And some of the things that we've done in the past, we've said like, well, there's this energy around this idea. Now let's see how we turn that energy into something that could be what we feel like would be better. And in many cases, that's like informed off of like all the stuff we've seen in Web 2. And I think that it's not that you shouldn't try to redirect energy. It's just that it's better to figure out how to ride the wave that's happening than how to take the wave and somehow make it go in a slightly different direction. And it's hard enough to get up and ride the wave that's already happening. And so the question is like, and this mismatch of like incentives is kind of at the root of why I think a lot of things don't work, just in general, which is like, well, I need to raise money for my game and people want to buy NFTs. Therefore, I'm going to figure out a way to sell NFTs to raise money for my game. But like, they're not really connected in a way that people ask for, right? It's this like incentive misalignment piece. And so I think the real thing is to think about like, what do people in the space actually want? What are they actually excited about? And then see if you can make something that's closer and closer to not having to create a new, people call it meta or something. It's more like, you know, virtuals was a really good example of this, where like with the AI tokens last year, it really was just pump.fun for AI, right? There's like only slightly more to it than that. And so our lesson is like, we were like, well, let's help these other token communities build these game ecosystems. And what we basically learned is they weren't that excited about doing that. It was just like too much of a level of a jump in motivations for them to be interested. That was with the open game protocol stuff we were doing. And this is much more like, what do people want to do right now? How do we give them exactly that? And how do we meet, you know, all these groups where they are at this moment? That doesn't mean it's guaranteed to work. It just means that like there's being able to recognize what's already happening and then figuring out how to ride that wave, I think is actually really important. And then like giving people something fundamentally new while giving them exactly what they're already looking for is such a hard challenge. But in crypto, I guess what that comes down to is like the traders are looking for a certain thing, and the traders run where the attention is in crypto. You're in crypto to build products that are ultimately financialized. And if they don't meet the needs of the traders, then you're probably not going to get the benefits of building in crypto. And there are many, many challenges with building in crypto that are technical and product related and marketing related and everything else. So you should probably make sure that you try to first and foremost meet the needs of the people who are trading, because they're the thing that is the lever, that is the reason that you implement the technology in the first place. And so, you know, I won't say that I've been involved with a bunch of game companies that have, I think, been the biggest games in Web3. All of them have had huge ups and downs because nothing has really like lasted in this space for more than a few years. They've all had things they've gotten right and wrong, but like, I feel like we're still out there searching for the model, right? That's what it's about, is like just figuring out what is the actual thing with this that sticks. It took a lot of effort for games as a service to come about. There were a lot of shots on goal even before Zynga came around and popularized the model and made it scale. And I think we'll look back and we'll probably see everything that's been going on in crypto games the same way, where it's like lots of really good attempts, and then finally like somebody figures it out, and then it scales, and we forget how long it took to get there.
True or false? In 3 years, more games will be made by AI agents or studios.
Oh, true, 100% true.
All right.
And I'm not saying they'll be the same scale, by the way. I mean, like what will a lot of people, what they'll say, the people that are in traditional games right now, if I couldn't call them traditional, they'll look at the games that are made by AI and they'll say that's not a game. That's what they said about Zynga's games, actually, which is really interesting because now no one debates whether or not these Roblox games are games. They may not like them. No one debates whether a mobile game is a game, but everyone, most of the people we met in these game studios would say that these freemium games are not a game. Like the way that the leveling works, the way that the game is balanced, that you have to buy these other things to progress. This is not a game. And so I suspect that by my definition, that in 3 years, yeah, it'll be way more AI games than real games. But that a lot of people who are holding on to real games will just look at those AI games and they'll say, well, those aren't games. So they can win too by their own definition.
Yeah, Justin, give us the plug. How do we make sure that we stay like all notifications on for everything that you tweet about? Where should we follow you? What's your X account? What's your Instagram? What's your MySpace, Facebook? Give it to us all, man.
Well,
I think we need to be like plugged into every single post of yours.
Okay, well, yeah, you can find me at JTWALD on X, JTWald, and then we've got our official Play.Fun account on X is Play.Fun Sol, SOL. So yeah, we're actually like at the moment that we're recording this, we're still in soft launch, but before this video goes out, we'll definitely be live. So yeah, excited to see what everybody thinks.
Yeah, and hey, when are we gonna get some Seeker activity too as well, man? When are we gonna build something for Seeker?
We should actually. Yeah, haven't met with them about it yet, but we definitely would love to.
Hey, Justin, at this point, just send me the contract. I'll come work and I'll create these games, man. I could come up with these ideas like 24/7. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, it's people like you.
I'm
That's
chronically
what I mean.
online. I call myself a chronically online Solana marketer, right? Like that's all I do. Like I need to get a life. But I mean, I have the ideas. You tell me, send me the contract. I'll start tonight. We could start pumping out games like tomorrow.
All right. Let's go. No, exactly. I think it will be people like you that crush it at stuff like this in the beginning. So yeah, let's go. I'll send it to you.
If you have your notifications on for Toli said this a couple of weeks ago. He thinks podcasters are going to be the people that are going to create the coolest apps or coolest projects because we're constantly in front of so many new innovative tech that we're seeing, and we're like thinking ideas of how to really get this kind of going. And I think like, yeah, my brain at least goes a million miles a day every single day, and I'm just like, Jesus. The question should be for me, how do I stay focused? I'll tell you, man, it's not an easy thing to stay focused, but here I am. Justin, man, once again, I appreciate you coming on. I know you're really excited. I'm excited about what you're building. I'm a huge fan of what you're building. I'm here to support everything we can about Play.Fun. We'll stream Play.Fun. We'll get it in the Discord. We'll do it all. But next couple weeks, what is it? Can we give like some sort of alpha here of like when should we kind of like be expecting this? Because I need to take PTO so I could be fully on Play.Fun.
Well, we're gonna announce this week, so maybe before this video drops. But yeah, it'll be out ASAP.
All right, man. Well, once again, appreciate you coming on. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon, and we'll be supporting Play.Fun.
All right, thanks, man. Really.